On our morning show today from WRCO, we are pleased and privileged to have author David Benjamin in the studio with us. He'll be in town here later this morning at the Brewer Public Library in Richland Center for Author Book Talk. He'll talk about his newest book, Upstairs and the 3 M's Essential in a Compelling Mystery Plot. Well, David, thanks for making the trip from Madison to join us here today.
Oh, you stated that well about the essential to a compelling mystery plot, and that's well said.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, maybe I've got still a future in radio, but I don't know.
I don't.
I work on it every day, David. So good to see you. And you made it through all the construction in Madison and here in Richland Center as well.
Yeah, right. As I said, we can all blame Joe Biden for this.
Oh, is that right?
Well, yeah, all that money that he appropriated for public works, which hasn't been clawed back yet by the Trump administration, is being spent pell-mell by all these towns that got the money.
Well, we need it.
Yeah.
Here, that's for sure. Yeah, we were bumping and rocking around here. So.
Well, the highway here is a little bumpy too.
Yes, it is. Well, let's talk about it. You've been busy. You put this new book out. How long has it been in the works, David?
It was. I finished the book. I sent it off to the printer in February. It became officially available on my website the middle of last month. My website, by the way, is www.lastkidbooks.com because I am also, besides being an author, I'm a publisher, and my imprint is called Last Kid Books,
which is named after
after the first. I guess I called it a novel. Borders called it U.S. history, but it's called The Life and Times of the Last Kid Picked, and it chronicles fictionally, but also accurately my growing up in Tomah, and with a few chapters that are set in Madison, where I moved when I was 13.
Were you truly the last kid picked, David?
Pretty much, yeah. But one of the points I make in the book is that there are kids who aren't picked at all, and they just kind of hover around during recess and wait for the bell to ring.
Mm-hmm. True. Yeah. Had it been, though, for a book club or something, something more literary, you may have been the first kid picked, though, right?
Yeah. Well, when you grow up in a small town, you realize very early in life that intellect has no value.
It's more about dodgeball or softball.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's the stars on the football and basketball teams who get all the glory. The writers are just hiding in the background, chronicling it all.
Right. Well, you've lived in some of the biggest cities, but you still have the love for the small town, don't you?
One of the elements in Upstairs is life in the apartments above stores along Main Street, okay? And I lived in one of those. And so I always thought of myself as a city kid. Even though I was in Tomah, the population was about 4,500. So but I had an itchy foot. I covered that entire town. I was everywhere in town. So when we moved to Madison, I covered the entire east side on my bicycle. I just wanted to get out and experience the city. One of the things I did in high school was if I couldn't sleep, it would be like 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock at night. I would walk out the door and walk all the way around Lake Monona, which is 13 miles.
Wow!
And get home about 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the morning and fall dead asleep. But I just needed to move around. And so living in a whole bunch of places all over the world was very comfortable for me, and living in cities was always very comfortable for me.
At that time in Madison, maybe it was a little safer,
If you're in Richland Center or Tomah or Nakusa or someplace like that, you see Madison as a hotbed of crime. But I've never encountered any crime at all in Madison. There are a few places, where that are trouble spots in town. But those are trouble spots that have to do with the tough existence of the people who live there, and that's true of every city. Madison, compared to say when I lived in Boston, and that was I lived in some pretty dangerous areas in Boston, and Madison was way safer than Boston, New York.
I'm sure.
Even Paris.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Paris. Which you spend part of the year there. How are things there?
The interesting, people, it's funny. People ask me about crime a lot, and I write about crime. I don't encounter a lot of crime, and in Paris, I live right in the heart of the city. The trouble spots in Paris are outside the city on the fringe. They moved all the poor people to beyond the Beltline. They're called the périphérique in Paris, and so the poor people in Paris have a very difficult time because they have ethnic names that make them unemployable. There are second generations of people living in Paris who are Parisians, who are French, but they can't get a job because their name is Aziz or something like that. It's a tough environment for immigrants there, just as it is here. Cities aren't fair.
Mm-hmm. Many authors and poets have traveled to Paris. Get that inspiration. Do you find more inspiration there, or when you're writing here in Wisconsin, or where?
I like to pretend that I'm more inspired to write in Paris. But the simple fact is that when I'm in Madison, I do a lot of shopping and errand running, and I have a little less time to write. When I'm in Paris, the demands of household chores are a little less onerous, so I get to do a little bit more writing in Paris. But I sit in a room without a window and write. So it isn't as though I'm wandering along the banks of the Seine and feeling the inspiration of the city. But the nice thing is that when we go out for our coffee, or we go out shopping or something like that, we're in Paris. We're in the most beautiful city in the world, and it's just it's gratifying to be there. Yes, a lot of writers have, of course, written in Paris, but one of the things. Well, I wrote a book called An Apartment in Paris about our adventure in buying our apartment in Paris, but also of educating ourselves to how to live in the city, in this particular city. And one of the things I noticed about other writers in Paris is that they don't write much about Paris. They write about the people they know, and the places they drink, and the parties they go to. People like Robert McCalman in the Lost Generation era, or even Hemingway. They don't write much about Paris. They write about their acquaintances. So writing about the city is a relatively rare thing among the writers who've worked in Paris.
Being a music guy, one of the things I noticed from visiting there was you'd go into a cafe or a bar or whatever, and American music would be playing over the loudspeaker.
Soft hits of the 70s.
Yeah, exactly. Right? It was all old. I'm like, hey, I know that song. I just played it.
Yeah, well, I can steer you to a couple of good jazz joints.
I'm sure you can. Yeah, interesting stuff. So, in terms of the new book, we're going to talk about that today at the Brewer Public Library at 11, and you're going to put on a presentation. Can you tell us about that?
Right. This is one of my older presentations. My publicist, you've talked to Sharon Alden. She doesn't like the traditional reading and signing format for authors. That's pretty dull, and I never cared much for it either. So we put together a whole series of essentially seminars. And this particular seminar is about I'm simplifying the murder mystery down to three elements. I call them the 3 M's. Every mystery story needs a MacGuffin, which is the thing that everybody is focused on. Probably one of the most famous MacGuffins is in the film The Maltese Falcon. Because this Maltese Falcon, which is supposed to be a diamond encrusted figurine, is what everybody's going for. The MacGuffin is really irrelevant. It's relevant in the fact that it drives the plot, but getting it and holding on to it it turns out to be not that important. It's just a plot driver. Another element, very familiar, very common in murder mysteries, is the mastermind, the criminal mastermind, modeled after Moriarty in the Sherlock Holmes mystery. So I call that the Moriarty. Okay. This character is usually shady, difficult to know. He's elusive, He's more in the background, and he or she is the evil force that's trying to get the MacGuffin away from the good people. And then the third element is the Marlowe. I named this particular element after Philip Marlowe, the hard-boiled detective created by Raymond Chandler in novels like The Little Sister, The Big Sleep, Farewell, My Lovely, and so forth. And he or she is, it can be any sort of character. Miss Marple is also a Marlowe in the Agatha Christie mysteries. Hercule Poirot is the Marlowe, and this is the sleuth. The sleuth ideally is a little bit detached from humanity, flawed in some way, and brilliant in his or her ability to solve the crime, to track the MacGuffin, and to defeat the Moriarty.
So we figured out the MacGuffin is not something you find at McDonald's, then, in other words.
An egg MacGuffin, yes.
Yeah. No, but
that's good. That's good. I'm gonna sell that. We should sell that to McDonald's.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, but no. Truthfully, MacGuffin, that came from Hitchcock, didn't it?
That's Hitchcock. Yeah. He theorized the murder mystery, and he knew. I'm sure that every mystery writer before Hitchcock existed had a concept of this object, this thing that has to be captured, pursued, found, saved from the bad guys. But Hitchcock's the one who gave it a name, and it's been spelled a number of different ways. But I came across the term MacGuffin when I read a book called The Liveliest Art by Arthur Knight, which is, I think, still the best primer on film that you can possibly read. But he spelled it Maguffin, and that's how I spell it too.
Did you grow up liking Hitchcock and watching those movies? I
didn't realize it when I was a kid, but I was a film buff when I was fairly young. Not so much Hitchcock, just trying to drink in every movie I could possibly see. And I think I fell in love with Hitchcock when I was watching The Late Show in Toma when I was probably 10 or 11 years old, and Rear Window was on.
Oh yeah,
and Rear Window is just a brilliant film, and I didn't know it was Hitchcock, but I loved Rear Window. And then of course Rear Window was taken out of circulation for about 25 years because of copyright issues. So I saw it before that dispute, and then didn't get to see it again until much later. But now I have a copy of it, of course.
Raymond Burr, right? Isn't he the
Raymond Burr plays the bad guy?
The bad guy,
yeah,
Jimmy
right.
Stewart,
yeah.
and the suspense when you feel like he's coming back, he's coming over to the building to get him. And,
right.
That's a little scary there.
Yeah, there was a remake of Rear Window called Disturbia with Shia LaBeouf, and it was it was reset in the suburbs, but it's actually it isn't recognizable as a remake of Rear Window because so much of it was changed. But it's a good film. I enjoy watching it.
Why do people? Why are we enthralled by murders, mysteries, and things like that?
Because we live lives of routine. We live most people live pretty peaceful, safe lives, and a murder is like a tornado coming through town. It creates tension, drama. It shatters the routine, and somehow, it's, as a writer, it's so easy to build a story around a murder that I think it was, the first murder mysteries were written in the 19th century. Wilkie Collins wrote a book called The Moonstone, which I regard as the first true murder mystery, although Edgar Allan Poe's Murders in the Rue Morgue was contemporaneous with that. It's, for a writer, it's just fun to do because you have a mystery. You don't know, something significant, something dramatic and powerful has happened, but you don't know how it happened. When of course, you know as well as I do. I have this series of books that's set in a small town that I made up, Hercules, Wisconsin. You know as well as I do that murders don't happen in small towns, and if they do, it's usually something like, the wife gets really, really ticked off at her husband and hits him over the head with the rolling pin, and he falls down, hits his head on the counter, and dies on the floor, and there's no mystery there. So even if you do have a murder in a small town, you don't have a mystery. So plot wise, a writer wants something dramatic to happen, and then he wants a mystery. He wants it to be confusing and incomprehensible to normal people, requiring someone like Philip Marlowe to step in and figure out what's going on. So it's I'm not sure if the audience demanded mysteries as much as writers saw an easy way to entertain the audience, tell a story, sell books, make money by coming up with mysteries. But it's become such an important genre now that every writer thinks about writing mysteries at some point in their career, I think.
Just yesterday, we had students in the building here from Riverdale schools. They're putting on an Edgar Allan Poe reading this weekend, so it was kind of interesting to quiz them about it and what they think of Edgar Allan Poe.
Quoth the Raven nevermore.
Yes, that was one of them, the reading, I think,
Right,
this
yeah,
weekend.
yeah.
So, good stuff. Quite an influential writer, though.
Edgar Allan Poe was really crazy, very, very reclusive. Hardly anybody ever saw him, and he had a lot of issues with his mental health, but I think that was that mental intellectual turmoil made his writing possible, and made his particular type of writing possible. One of the things that I explain to, especially to students, is that you have many sides. Every one of us has a dark side. Edgar Allan Poe's dark side was darker and larger than most other people's dark sides.
Very troubled.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
The Anatomy of a Mystery book is out now, and we'll talk about how you can get it. I know that we would like to maybe have you read a passage of that coming up.
Oh, right. Yes, sure.
Would you like to set the stage before we take the break here?
Yeah, right. As I said, everything takes place in Hercules, Wisconsin. The police chief is a defrocked Chicago Police Department detective named Jim Otis, and a lot of the plot of the story is laid out at a bar in downtown Hercules, AJ's, run by AJ Cartwright, who is one of Jim Otis's few friends in town. But there's at the end of the bar every now and then, in order to advance the plot, I gather a group of characters, and they talk about things that are happening in town, and in particular, what's happening with the Cook building down at the edge of town, which seems to have a curse on it.
Okay. And the plot thickens.
Yes.
We'll come back with David Benjamin in just a little bit here to hear a passage from An Anatomy of a Mystery. He'll also be in person today at the Brewer Public Library starting at 11. Author David Benjamin is in the studio with us here on WRCO. Again, his presentation at the Brewer Public Library will be titled An Anatomy of a Mystery. Need to make clear his newest book is called Upstairs, the sixth book in his Jim Otis detective series. And David, if you'd be so kind to maybe read us a passage today.
Sure. Yes. This passage impressed one of my friends as kind of the epitome of class distinction in small towns. As I said, everybody gathers at the end of the bar at AJ's, and there are a number of characters mentioned in this passage, including Earl Schober, who's Jim Otis's deputy. Jim Otis's daughter Natalie is in the story. His girlfriend Carol Demeter, who's a teacher at Hercules High, is here. Kenny Kelly is the drunk who hangs around the bar. There is a mention of dog saliva on the bar. That's because AJ's son Jesse has just rescued a Great Dane and introduced him to everybody. Crystal McDougal is the superannuated hippie who hangs around the bar, and let's see now who else. And that's pretty much the whole cast in this short passage. And as I said, it's about the curse on the Cookhook building, which is an abandoned building on the edge of town, that used to be a hardware store with a couple of apartments upstairs. And so we begin with Chief, said Earl, wrapping his hands around his pint. I kind of got reamed by the city council the other night over that condemned building down by the bus depot. Otis sighed. It seems like all I hear about lately is that place. Wasn't it supposed to be torn down? They used the money on snow removal, said Earl. I hate to see it go, said AJ, wiping spilled spirits and dog saliva off the bar. It's got some history. You would know, AJ, said Crystal encouragingly. Well, said AJ. He turned and cast a glance toward Ernie Olson, the bartender who helped out on weekends. Assured that the trade was under control, he returned to Crystal. You knew Andy Sturdivant, who ran the S&Q Hardware. Well, yes, we were in school together, but he flew south, right? That's right. He barely left a ripple behind. Just a nice, quiet guy who ran a run-of-the-mill hardware store, said AJ. Upstairs, though, that's a whole nother story. Crystal nodded knowingly. What do you mean? Asked Earl. AJ leaned his elbows on the bar and waxed sociological. You know, he said, we say a word like ghetto and we think big cities, but every little town the size of Hercules, or even smaller, has its slums where the wretched and lost scratch out their lives. For instance, we got all those families living in trailers and double-wides out at Tornado Estates. Tornado Estates? Asked Natalie. That's not its real name, Natalie, Carol explained, but everybody calls it that. And then, AJ continued, you have all the dark and lone and desolate apartments above the stores and bars along Main Street. That's our ghetto. Single moms whose husbands are just a bad memory. Old folks trying to survive the month on a $1,000 Social Security check. Lonesome men who have jobs but drink away their wages or blow it all at the Ho Chunk Casino in the Dells. Families of GIs stationed at McCoy for 6 months or a year, and then they're gone before their kids can settle into school and make friends. Farm workers without papers who only stay as long as there's a harvest, and then it's hasta la vista before ICE can show up. Sad sacks, addicts, ex-cons, whores, grifters, drifters, cripples, and shut-ins. All the lonely people, said Crystal. Where do they all belong? We don't see much of them, but there they are, living and dying, said AJ. Upstairs.
Very interesting. From the book Upstairs, I noted a little Beatles thing, too, all the lonely people.
Right, yes. Yeah. Well, Crystal McDougal is a superannuated hippie. She knows that stuff.
From Eleanor Rigby, yes. Yeah, that's interesting. You know, one of the things I noticed when you read that is a lot of small towns, they're pretty much similar, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you know, as I said, as I told you, I always thought of myself as a big city person because I lived upstairs in downtown Toma. But small towns have the full range of social social classes and social disparities as you see in big cities. It's just that it's on a much smaller scale, and you know the people who everybody knows everybody, but it doesn't necessarily change their condition in life.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the bigger city, they kind of fall between the cracks.
Right,
I mean, they're those kind of people, but you don't notice them as much because you don't know them personally.
Yeah. One of the things I noticed living in Paris is that there are a lot of homeless people in there too. They're called clochards, and in our neighborhood in Paris, the homeless people are known by their names. They're they have relationships with some of the shopkeepers. It's more the neighborhoods of Paris are more like small towns than big city neighborhoods. I lived in New York, and most the homeless people are totally anonymous and shoved aside. But in Paris, they have a certain social status that's at the bottom, but at least people acknowledge them and speak with them.
Everybody has a story to tell too. You ever wonder when you see someone, a homeless person or whatever, what the story is?
Oh, of course, yeah. That's it's the old there but for fortune go I mentality. I think one of the saving graces of moral people is to recognize that the downtrodden are like them in some ways, and whatever made them downtrodden is common to the human condition, and we need to have a measure of sympathy for them, and that's that's all I can say about that, right?
True. Yeah. Upstairs book. It's again the 6th in the series. The Hercules. You mentioned that, which is fictionally set near Richland Center. Why did you initially choose this area?
Basically, when I started the series with a book called Jailbait, I knew I wanted to do it in a small town, and I kind of looked around the map and decided that there are these big empty spaces on Highway 33, which is south of here, right?
Yes.
And so I planted a Hercules on Highway 33 in one of those sections of highway where there was nothing but road. And later, my wife and I took a drive down Highway 33 just to see where Hercules might be, and I decided that it was somewhere between Hillsborough and Wildcat Mountain.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Not far from the Kickapoo River.
Right.
Which is one of my favorite rivers.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. What a great place in the area. We're very fortunate to have lots of rivers. The Pine goes through here as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Kayak through here and whatnot. In terms of the books that you write, a lot of fiction. Have you ever written biographies or anything like that?
Well, as I said, the first book that was published by Random House was The Life and Times of the Last Kid Picked, which is what I call a fictional memoir. And I have a series of 4 books that I call my coming of age quartet, which are roughly based on my experience growing up. But it's the important thing that I tell people is that the character in the book might seem to be like me, but it's not me. When I talk to high school kids about writing, I tell them, you go ahead and write about yourself, but you probably don't know much about yourself. You're too young to do that. But the thing you should remember is that there isn't just one you; there are many yous, and you have. And if you're writing about yourself, pick one aspect of yourself, make that a character, make it a character that people wouldn't recognize as you, and then tell the story. And so that I've always done that with my coming of age quartet started with The Life and Times of the Last Kid Picked, which was a fictional memoir, followed by 3 novels. The second one was called Fat Vinny's Forbidden Love, which is a comedy about discovering sex unwillingly in 7th grade in Toma. Then They Shot Kennedy, which won the Midwest Book Award for fiction, is set in Madison in a fictional high school, very similar to mine. And then Summer of '68 obviously takes place in the summer of '68 during a tumultuous period in American history at a summer camp in East Troy, Wisconsin. But with the same character and the same voice carry through all 4 of those books, and they really they chronicle the challenge of growing up in mid-century America when it was shifting from a kind of a sweet 50s tranquility to the turmoil of the late 60s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had the opportunity to quiz you about a few of those books too that you mentioned. Yeah. The Kennedy one was interesting because that was the name of your principal at the time, wasn't it?
No. Yeah. It was the name of the freshman basketball coach who was a middle school social studies teacher.
Okay.
And the story I told, it's in the book, is that the day that Kennedy was shot. By the way, this book is not a conspiracy theory about Kennedy's assassination. I was going up the stairs in the A wing at La Follette High School. A kid named Steve Cates was coming down the stairs, and he turned to me and said, "They shot Kennedy." And I looked over to Mr. Kennedy's classroom next. I was next to the staircase, and I said, "Yeah, Mr. Kennedy's a jerk, but that's no reason to shoot him." It took me a minute to realize that the Kennedy in question was not the president, but was the president rather than the middle school social studies teacher. But that's, that really typifies the kind of detachment that kids have from the world around them.
Yeah.
It's harder for them to connect their lives to the what's going on in the world because their lives are so insular.
Yeah, I love history, but that's a good point where it's going on at the same time. You can learn about it through that, or maybe it kind of prompts you to go looking for more history, read more about it.
Yeah, when I entered writing competitions with all 4 of those books, I entered them also in the historical fiction category because I don't know if the 60s, the 50s, or 60s are far enough back to be history, but for me they are, and probably for you too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most definitely. Do you think that young people are as interested in history as they used to be, or not?
That's a good question, and it's really hard to determine. With their intense focus on those little 4-inch screens that they carry around all the time, looking at cat videos and so forth. I'm not sure that they have access to history the way we did when we were growing up. I mean, I was always focused. I was always interested in history when I was a kid. I'm not sure other kids were, but I read the newspaper every day from the time I was 7 or 8 years old, and all the newspapers not only report what's happening now, but they give background on that, and the better reporters put the current events into a context that includes the history. When I was a newspaper writer, I always tried to fill in with background, carrying things back to the origins of the story. I'm not. It's difficult to say whether the bulk of kids are really learning history the way I learned history. But I'm not sure if the way I learned history was the way my peers learned history. History is something that we tend to overlook if we possibly can.
My fear is that the art of storytelling is lost, because when I was growing up, I loved to hear the older generation talk about the Depression or World War II or whatever it was. I soaked in all of those things, and now I'm not sure the attention span is there for somebody to sit and listen to someone tell a story.
Well, the thing is that you have to take away their phone.
Right. True.
And sit them down and talk to them. But in talking to younger people, when you take away, all that, the digital input that they're getting, which is always in short bursts, it's designed to to encourage a shorter attention span. It's designed to capture the attention of someone with a short attention span. When you sit and converse with kids, they're just as attentive as I think they can be. And as attentive as ever I was when I was growing up. But if you have this so many distractions pouring in on you all the time, it's difficult to hang on to any one of them for very long. The point is to eliminate the distractions.
Holding the book in your hand or reading electronically, what do you prefer?
Well, a book in your hand requires you to focus and concentrate. It's just one thing. If you're holding a phone, you can hit it with a thumb and go from one thing to another thing in a split second. The device itself is the distraction machine.
David Benjamin, the author, our guest in the morning show studios. I know you've won some awards over the years. One that you're most proud of?
That's hard to say. Probably the Midwest Book Award for They Shot Kennedy is certainly my most prestigious award. I got a silver medal in the Ben Franklin Awards from the Independent Book Publishers Association, which is a tough one to win, and that was for Fat Vinny's Forbidden Love. But my only marketing success as a publisher is winning awards. It isn't so much that the awards sell me books, but they validate me as a writer. These are all granted by independent publishing organizations, and you're judged by your peers and by editors and publishers. So whatever rejections I have suffered over the years are ameliorated by the fact that I've been winning these awards from independent press organizations.
We have lots of authors in the area. We've had a lot of them in our studio here with us. Do you have any advice for anybody starting out or thinking that maybe they have a book in them?
Yeah, find another career.
It's a good hobby, though, right?
Writing. I was just in New Jersey at the Independent Press Association book camp, and I did a presentation called "The Writer's Gauntlet," and becoming a professional writer. One of the things I point out is it's easy to be an author these days. There are book packagers who will, for a certain fee, accept your memoir without much editing, and they will design it and put it together into a book format, and you can print 100 copies, or you can do it by print on demand. And so in a period of 6 months, if you've finished a manuscript of your murder mystery or your memoir, you can be an author. But to become a professional writer is a lifetime of learning. I didn't consider myself worthy of calling myself a writer until I was in my 40s, and by then I had written literally millions of words. But it's something that it's mastering a lot of disciplines that don't come naturally, and which require more than talent. They require study and learning, and making a lot of mistakes and getting a ton of rejections.
Mm-hmm. Got to be able to take those, and use those.
Yeah, and then of course you might never make any money at it. You might never. Most writers don't make a living writing.
They have another job.
Right. Yes. Well, I married well. Yes, but a lot of people start writing after they've retired. When later in life, when they finally have time to write down what they think. One of my friends, Greg Renz, was a firefighter in Milwaukee for years until he retired from the fire department, and then he wrote a book called Beneath the Flames, which was a nice novel. Won him some awards and earned him credibility as a writer. But in order to do that, he took writing courses at the University of Wisconsin Extension and really studied the craft heavily before he dared to write the book. And now he has a second book called Beyond the Flames. His name is Greg Renz, R-E-N-Z, and you can look him up. He's a good guy.
So, do you have another book in the hopper at all times?
I always have a book in the hopper. Yes. Right. Yeah. I just upstairs just went to press, and I just sent to my copy editor a novel called The Springhaven Miracle, which is about the dark side of humanity. It's about the Springhaven Uplift Center. Springhaven is a suburb of a big city, which is nameless, and it's a rehabilitation center for the homeless, seemingly. But it's much more like a detention center for immigrants, and it's more like a concentration camp. My inspiration for it was a visit to Dachau outside of Munich. I went there twice. I encountered an old guy who had been a child whose father brought him into the kitchen at Dachau, and he thought it was a wonderful place with a lot of nice people and a lot of fun things to look at. And he didn't realize until later in life that he had treated a concentration camp as a playground, and he felt guilty about that all his life. So he kept going back to Dachau. He lived in the village, and talking to tourists like me, and explaining what his mistake, and he felt bad for his innocence. He spent his life atoning for being an ignorant child, visiting an awful place and not knowing it was awful. And so one of my characters is a little boy named Pete Williams, whose father visits the Springhaven Uplift Center because he has business there, and so Pete becomes part of the group who fight for the freedom of the homeless people who are incarcerated at the Springhaven Uplift Center. The book is I call it a black comedy, and I think you'll be interested in it because the historic, the function I use to tell the story. And to explain the progress of the Springhaven Uplift Center are a couple of DJs on morning DJs on WSSS, which is an AM station, the biggest signal in Spring County, who Rock and Roll and Riefenstahl and Lucy LaCrescent, who do this comic byplay, but also do the news, and the news explains what's going on with the Springhaven Uplift Center. So each part of the book is introduced by Rock and Rolly and Lucy LaCrescent.
Very creative. I'm impressed.
And that will be coming out in September. It's called The Springhaven Miracle.
It seems you find a lot of inspiration from just meeting people, and that probably started back in Tomo. And
I'm basically antisocial too. So
right.
So that's interesting, isn't it?
It is interesting. But the stories you tell, like from the everyday people, the bartender or the cop or whatever, I'm sure.
No, my dad was a bartender.
I was going to say, based on the life of real people.
Yeah. So. Right. Oh yeah. Right. Yeah. I encounter people all the time, even though I don't like them and they don't like me. I'm just kidding.
So it's a free program today at the Brewer Public Library, starting at 11. Can you tell us a little bit about what your presentation will be like?
Well, as I said, I'll be talking about the 3 M's of a murder mystery, plus the 2 other M's, murder and mystery, and just explaining how each element fits together, but also how loose that formula is. One of the great things about murder mysteries is that that they tend to have everyone seems to have one or more of that formula of the 3 M's, but you can get away with leaving one out or 2 out, and just wandering into whole different areas. It's a loose formula, but knowing the formula, knowing those 3 M's, helps the reader to understand how the story was put together, what was in the writer's mind. When I'm reading a murder mystery, I really don't care about solving the crime as figuring out how the writer pieced it together and keeps me interested in the story. I'm more of a structuralist than a puzzle solver. But if you're a puzzle solver, knowing those 3 M's is a useful device.
Fascinating stuff. Hopefully, people will come out and meet you in person, David.
Oh, I would like to meet lots of people.
Absolutely.
Despite the fact that I'm antisocial.
Get the book and get it signed as well. But it's a free program coming up this morning at 11 at the Brewer Public Library Upstairs. It's open to all, and that's a little play on the title of your book, too.
I appreciate that, yes.
Upstairs.
Yeah.
It's the new
Shall
book.
we mention my website again?
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, www.lastkidbooks.com.
Indeed. And how many books is this for you now?
I have 24 books in print.
In print.
Yeah.
That's great. And the best place to get them is on the website. So
Yes.
Good deal. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
So good to see you again. David Benjamin joining us on the morning show today. Go see him in person today at the Brewer Public Library beginning at 11.